make a big impact on your photos too. Today we have Rob and Kristen Tesar of Rob plus Kristen Photography with us to tell us more. And I probably just butchered her last name, so say it for us correctly.
You did it pretty well.
That's close enough.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this husband-wife team have been photographing weddings in the Carolinas for 7 years, and they have photographed more than 250 weddings, which is a crazy impressive number, and been featured on a number of national and local publications, including Bustld. And we are super excited to have you guys here today.
Yay.
To tell
Thanks for
us
having us.
all the things about wedding photo timelines.
We know
Yes.
some things.
We
About
do.
that.
Well, after 250 weddings, of course, you know, maybe just a few things.
We've picked up some tips.
I bet.
Yeah.
And obviously, the timeline can make a big difference on y'all's day as well. So,
Absolutely.
you know, how it's going to flow and how it's going to feel. So the first thing we want to kind of talk about is first looks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you pro them? Are you against them? Tell us all the
Somewhere
things
in
about-
between.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we would be in between because we do both and leave it up to our brides to decide that.
And
but
grooms.
Don't forget the grooms, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, the couples
Brides
together.
and grooms.
Yeah.
They're both important.
Don't forget us.
But to list, pros and cons at kind of face value of a first look. If you do a first look, you get your jitters out of the way. You see each other before the ceremony. It also gives us an opportunity to do a lot of the portraits before the ceremony and also the full wedding party shots. Usually this goes really well. Sometimes weddings go late and then the schedule gets bounced around anyway, but you still get to see each other before the ceremony, and usually everything feels easier after that. Like the stress of the big moment of the wedding at that point is gone, and it's usually a little bit easier to move forward. Cons of a first look actually depend on the time of year, which a lot of people don't tend to think about much. If you do a first look in July, you're going to be doing your portraits at 1 p.m. under the hot summer sun in the worst light possible for portraits.
I look my best when I'm glistening.
Yeah.
I would argue it's not glistening at 1 o'clock on a July afternoon.
You tend to look like you made it to adulthood without knowing what coffee or sleeping is. Like dark circles under your eyes,
Yeah.
huge pit stains. Everybody looks
Swamp
wonderful.
pits.
Or also
Yeah.
being a new parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much the equivalent.
So, an indoor venue, it alleviates some of that. But during the summer, not great. Later in the year, after daylight savings time, a first look we think is almost necessary because after your ceremony, the sun is gone. So at that time of year, it may be something you want to think about a little more directly in terms of light. And also thinking about portrait light. If you have your heart set on golden hour photos, you're not going to get those during a first look. That light usually happens after the ceremony, unless you're having like a Catholic type schedule, with your ceremony at 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it.
Tell us about what is a golden hour for the people who are listening who don't know what that is.
Golden hour is the hour right before sunset when things look golden.
And the photos look amazing.
It's a very technical term.
It is.
You have to have a subscription to Photoshop. To
Yeah,
look at this.
yes. It's actually a preset in Photoshop. Golden hour.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Probably on Instagram as well. I love it.
So what about not doing one?
Yeah, so we get a lot of clients who do not want to do a first look because they have always imagined having that moment at the aisle when, the bride comes out for the first time and they see each other. And
That was this guy.
Yeah. And typically our advice with that is if that's the moment you've been dreaming of your whole life, I would absolutely not compromise, doing a first look for saving time on photos. I think that's a really big misconception a lot of people have is, they're going to save a lot of time on photos. And like Rob just said, if you have a photographer like us, especially who, want to get some of that golden hour action going on, you're going to be doing portraits at sunset anyways.
That's right.
You might as well have that moment that you've always dreamed about. It's your wedding day, and it's very important to make sure that you have it happen exactly the way you've imagined, and you shouldn't compromise just to make the schedule easier.
Yeah, we tell all of our clients that they should decide first emotionally before they consider the time or portraits. Because seeing each other on your wedding day only happens once, and it should happen the way you imagined it. We know how to work every kind of schedule, and if you want to take portraits at 1 p.m. or 9 p.m. or literally at any second during the day. We'll figure it out if that's what you want for your schedule.
Yeah, and any photographer will, who does weddings especially, is going to know how to work your schedule, based around what your needs are or desires are.
I think that's a great tip, because a lot of times people feel like, oh, I need to do it because of photos or whatever, and that's not really what they want.
Yeah.
And then I feel like they end up disappointed. So I think that's a really good advice, that you can make it work either way.
Yeah, I love that you guys take that approach. It's more about what does the couple want and what are their needs, rather than trying to project one way or another.
Right.
I think that's great.
So what do you do if the couple like disagrees? Like, how do they decide if they're going to do one or not?
We don't get involved in that decision. No,
we
I'm
usually
kidding.
don't know how that goes down. We present the advice, and then on the wedding day, we are given an answer.
Yeah, we do actually get that sometimes too. And ultimately, I guess our advice to most people who are trying to decide whether or not to do a first look is just to think about whether or not you think you're going to be nervous. That really should be the biggest determining factor, because I think probably the majority of clients that we work with who decide to do a first look do it because they just feel like they're going to feel more relaxed. And being able to go through the rest of the day without that like nervous gut, like feeling like butterflies in your stomach kind of feeling, that typically is when we see people choose a first look over doing a traditional schedule.
Yeah, if you are undecided and are a bride or groom with social anxiety, then a first look might be a good idea.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like people really don't like regret necessarily like in the moment doing one or the other. So
No, I don't think they do at all.
Either way, you're making a good
I think
choice.
you're right.
So do you need to think about that at the point of booking? Like when you're looking at number of hours and packages and things like that, is that something that you should be considering before you even hire somebody?
I think it depends on the photographer you're hiring, because some photographers do have time limitations on their packages and some don't. So it just kind of depends on who you're looking at hiring. In my personal opinion, I guess I would just ask the photographer, do I need to decide this right now before I select a package? And if I change my mind about, the way I want the schedule to go, can I add hours later? I think that's a good question to ask if you're in between things.
Makes sense.
Yeah, knowing how much that extra hour or two is going to cost you, so you can kind of have an idea for your budget, can be a good thing to know in the beginning instead of finding that out later.
Yeah, that could probably be some sticker shock later, depending.
When you realize, well, you're gonna have to pay extra. Yeah,
Right.
No, that's a great point. So.
Yeah, and same for video too. Like I would, ask, can I change my mind about how long we have you, or are you there all day? Like those are good questions to ask a videographer as well.
So I'm just curious, did you guys have a first look?
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Though we got married before we knew anything about the modern wedding schedule.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Our wedding is not indicative of what usually happens at most weddings.
Would you do one today if you guys were getting married with everything you know?
Good question.
It's hard to say, because we always talked about if we redid our wedding, we do like the half elopement, half reception party schedule.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So maybe, but it would feel different.
Yeah. Personally, I mean, just thinking back on our clients who have done first looks, I do have to say, like, I often think that moment is really emotional, even if they're not necessarily expressive with each other. I think more times than not, they're grateful that they had that moment in private versus, doing it in front of literally everyone who came to watch the wedding.
Everyone literally.
Right.
Yeah. So I would probably choose a first look if we were to do it over again.
Yeah. Though can also add, all of our clients who have chosen not to do a first look, none of them have ever come back and said, I really wish I did a first look. Yeah. They all appreciated having that moment. So really, if it's what you had your heart set on either way, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't do a first look this
No,
time. Next time.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, we didn't do one. I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
So now you've decided if you have a first look, if you're going to do a first look or not. So let's talk about like the early part of the day before that first look. Details, getting ready. How important are these shots? How important is it to have a photographer there? Like, how much time do you need? Tell us a little bit about that portion.
Yeah, good questions. So as far as the getting ready time goes, for us, we often think of that as a warm-up period for everybody who is not used to who we are yet. So we like to show up and kind of get to know everybody, kind of feel out the room and like get everybody feeling, comfortable with us. That's a really important part of our process. We do have occasionally clients who are like, nope, I don't like getting ready shots at all, and I just want you to show up. And that's fine, but but we really like to get to know everybody ahead of time. So from our perspective, that's one benefit of getting ready shots. And as far as everything else goes with the detail shots, I'm not sure how other photographers do it, but typically I like to knock out as many detail shots early in the day as I can before things get super bonkers. So I like to ask our clients to put together a bag for me of their invitation suite and their rings and pretty much anything that they want photographed that's, a paper good or like any of their special jewelry, anything like that I can kind of add into their other detail shots like shoes and dress and all those things. That's really good for us to just have it literally all in one place. Especially if you're in the process of getting ready and you're in the makeup chair, you may not be able to walk away from the makeup chair to track down literally every piece of whatever it is that you need me to photograph. So I definitely recommend that for literally any person getting married. Just have all this stuff in a bag or a box somewhere, or give it to your wedding planner and let them kind of be the liaison for that stuff. I would say that getting ready shots from the guy's perspective is a little bit different. And with us being a husband and wife team, we actually like to get groom and bride getting ready shots. There are some photographers who work solo and they usually, get most of the getting ready shots for the bride, but maybe just a few like touch-up shots for the groom, like putting the cufflinks on kind of thing.
I would have hated not having all the photos of me putting my makeup on.
Yeah.
Or doing my hair.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so many pictures of you doing your bow tie there.
Right. That is true.
Or lack of
Right.
figuring out how to do his bow tie.
Because I couldn't. I had to go find somebody in the hotel to help me.
I think it's very important if you can. I mean, not everybody can do this if they have, especially like a solo photographer. But if you are in a situation where you have two shooters, I think it's amazing to have the guys getting ready shots in perspective with the girls, because I can't tell you how many times our clients tell us how fun it is to see what the other person was doing while they were getting ready.
Yeah.
And Rob has especially gotten some hilarious photos over the years, including a wedding one time where our groom forgot how to tie a tie and literally no one in the room knew how to do it. And Rob wound up going with them to Men's Warehouse and having a guy at the store tie the tie for him. And it was an incredible photo. It was so funny. And like, it's a story that we still, like we talk with that couple about how funny that moment was when we see them. And stuff like that is just so great. I love things like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. In our opinion, that part of the day is not so much about the detail shots, even though there are details that are always photographed then, but it's just kind of like the kickoff to your wedding. Like, hey, how did you start the day? What were you doing? What was I doing? And it does help later when we tell the wedding party, hey, everybody stand in a line and smile. And if we have been joking with them for like 2 hours up until that point, that part of the day goes so much faster and everybody has a more fun time than if that's the first time they've seen us and we kind of have to break the ice right then and there.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
And that way you have photo evidence of whatever the other person was doing while you were getting ready. Yeah. Like if they were watching a hot dog eating competition, which
why wouldn't you?
Has actually happened to us.
It has.
If it was on.
Yeah.
It was on.
Then you were watching.
And they were drinking, the guys were drinking beer and watching it, and it was the best thing ever.
I do always rank what the guys are watching on TV when they're getting ready.
Yeah.
Like bottom of the list is football because it's just the most vanilla thing you could watch. Top of the list is The Office, and then right below that is hot dog eating contest.
So was Joey Chestnut like in his prime, or?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I would be watching football though, which sounds pretty vanilla, I guess.
Yeah.
Roll Tide.
Everybody watches football, right? It's not new.
I'm pretty sure I'm the only one. I'm pretty special and unique.
Oh man.
I'm a snowflake. What about the wedding party photos? So should you do those? I guess it's going to kind of go back to that first look or not, but should you do these before or after the ceremony?
Well, no matter what, we always try and do the separate sides of the wedding party before the ceremony. Like all the bridesmaids or bridedudes and everybody on the guy's side. We always try and get those done first because it saves so much time later. And there is time at the beginning of the wedding day to get those done. So no matter what, we always think that should be taken care of. And full wedding party takes, I'm not sure how other photographers do it, but we tend to do those in about 10, 15 minutes. There's only so many
Sometimes
ways
5.
you can tell 15, 20 people to line up and look at the camera. So, whether you do a first look or keep it traditional, that doesn't affect our schedule much. But, it can help.
That's great. So then family photos obviously generally happen after the ceremony. How do you recommend kind of wrangling all these people and getting everyone that you want in those pictures for the family portraits, which is probably not the most fun part of the day?
Oh, definitely not.
For anybody involved.
No. Yeah. So as far as family photos go, preparation is key. And I say that because there are so many things that could get sidelined in this
That's
process.
Sammie's motto in life. Like,
Yeah.
like she
It
has it
Absolutely.
written on the mirror in the bathroom. Preparation.
I love it. Yeah, so not only, creating a list, and most photographers who exclusively do weddings or primarily do weddings are going to have some kind of template that they use to kind of get you started in that process, of course. But if you're working with a photographer who's not primarily in weddings or not, as experienced in weddings, just make sure you get every grouping on some kind of document and make sure that they have it prior to the wedding. The other key piece in this is make sure the family members who are going to be in the photos know to stay, because I can't tell you how many times people go missing. They go to the bar, they go to the bathroom, they go for a smoke, whatever, and we can't find them. And they're in this just one photo. And if they had just known that they needed to be there, then it would have been taken care of quickly. And so just preparation.
Yeah, that one person can really slow down the day and
Oh,
the photo process.
Yes, especially if it's somebody who's in a lot of the photos,
Right.
And you literally can't take any of them until that person gets back.
They're just, like, kinda hanging
that's a
out,
big deal.
waiting,
Like
yeah.
mom or dad.
Right, they're pretty important.
Yeah.
What about like people who have these like very crazy long lists for family shot lists? Like, what is your recommendation of like, how do you keep, and sometimes it's like a matter of like you have multiple, families or, divorces and all those things, but how do you recommend kind of keeping this portion going along quickly without needing 75 different groupings?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. I think the key with that would just be minimize your list as much as you can, first of all. Doing a first look in this situation would be great because then you have your whole cocktail hour to do family photos. If that's something that is already going to require a ton of your time on the wedding day, then that may be a big factor to weigh in your first look or not schedule. We've had clients actually who have decided to do a first look and do all their family photos before the ceremony as well for that reason. So I would just take it on a case-by-case basis. I would ask your photographer, how much time do you think we need? Here's my list. Should we do a first look in light of the fact that I have this monstrous family photo situation? And, especially sometimes that can get complicated too if you have like a parent and a step parent who just can't be in the same place at the same time. Sometimes maybe doing some of your photos before the ceremony and some of them after the ceremony is the best way to keep people separated. So that's also a strategy that you can put into play as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think communicating any kind of family dynamics is always helpful to your photographer, so they know
Absolutely.
not to put people next to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a huge advantage of having a physical list is I can't tell you how many weddings we've done where not a key person in the family has come up to us and been like, hey, is there a photo with so-and-so? When am I in a photo? We can say, look at the list. We have a list. We are going down the list. And nobody has ever said, I don't believe the list. They just listen and wait patiently for their turn. So it is a really great idea to, even if you have it on your Apple Watch or something, just print a piece of paper so you can wave it around. And it does make people listen on the wedding day.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing too, I forgot to mention is, make sure that your photographer has people's names that they go by, because your photographer yelling out mom, dad, brother, cousin, uncle is not going to get attention quickly. So make sure that they have people's names that they go by so you can get the rotations moving more quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about something. So as a planner and as a photographer, how do you, in those two vendor categories, how do you guys communicate when, like, obviously you would have something in mind, they may have something in mind. How do y'all kind of communicate that back and forth and make sure that all kind of coordinates well?
The timeline overall.
The timeline overall with also their timeline, because I mean Kristen could go rogue, right? And she's been known to go rogue and just do whatever she wants.
Yeah. I know. I think it's important to just communicate, like Kristen was saying, with preparation. Like, communicate beforehand, and as long as you're like communicating of like, hey, this is the timeline we're looking at. This is really all the time we have. Then they can say, okay, well, then this is all we can make work. So if you have 75 people on the family shot list, we can't do that because the planner's saying we only have 15 minutes and that won't work. So I think it's like communication on the front end, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that can go the other way too. I've had situations where wedding planners gave us way too much time and had people getting ready like crazy early in the day. And, we've looked at the schedule and realized that we don't need to start that early, and, they can have more time to get ready. And so pretty much anytime you can communicate way before things get rolling, like pretty much things start falling into place about a month before the wedding as far as the timeline goes. So I would say, like, as a vendor, just being in communication before like hair and makeup times get settled and things like that. That's so crucial.
Yeah, like for me, I always try to send the photographer the timeline first before I even share it with anyone else, because I want to get their feedback and say, okay, is this going to work? This is kind of what the bride's communicated to me. Does this work for you? And if they say yeah, then we can start communicating with beauty and locking that stuff in. Yeah, they're going to have the biggest impact on the day overall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's most of our questions on photography timeline. Is there anything else that you guys had that you wanted to share?
Yeah, pretty much just, as far as timing goes, one more thing to add to the equation. And thankfully, when we work with wedding planners, this is often not an issue, but if you're working without a wedding planner or you just have a venue coordinator, just make sure you know when your vendor meals are happening and where they're happening, because sometimes, venues will stick your photographer in some weird closet in the basement
where you're alone.
And you're alone. And
just sad and lonely.
Yeah.
Just sad and lonely.
Just you and your camera.
Yeah.
Chasing light.
Right. Yeah. But seriously, the best way to describe it is an anecdotal situation where one time we were doing a wedding at a rooftop venue here in Charlotte, and we were seated very far away from the action, and it was very loud and windy, and we couldn't hear what was going on, and the DJ did not communicate with us, and as a result we almost missed the cake cutting because we got our meal after all the guests did, and no one from the venue, none of the DJ's team came to communicate with us about that happening. And so obviously that doesn't happen all the time, but it's just good to know where your vendors are at all times. And that way nobody who's supposed to be there misses any of the big moments.
Yeah, because I feel like that I've heard that from other photographers too, like that this does happen without planners, that you'll be off somewhere eating dinner in some random room, and then the DJ takes it upon themselves to announce this, and you're just like running out of nowhere like, oh my gosh, I have to get this shot. So that's a great point. And making sure that your vendors have enough time to eat, and serving the meal when the bride and groom are eating is usually the best policy, right? So they can eat, because nobody wants pictures of themselves while they're eating. So you can serve that meal and everyone can feel better after eating and be there for all the big moments. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, really when it comes down to it, just vendors communicating is like so important. And I think A lot of times people just operate so independently of each other on wedding days, and really the best wedding experiences we've had from a work standpoint are when all the vendors are like, team, let's do this, team bride and groom. And, you know, it's more about like the communal experience of like working together to create the best wedding for the clients that you possibly can. And that's what we try to do at every wedding. You know, sometimes that doesn't play out very well, depending on, you know, who's there and, you know, if your DJ is an iPod, that can be a tricky situation.
That's right. That makes it a little harder
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, we always try and communicate, but those are the best wedding days when
Yeah.
all the vendors agree that the goal is do the best you can for the bride and groom.
Yeah.
Like if I'm doing nothing and the planner is setting up chairs, I will help set up chairs because then the planner can get on to doing something else that's probably more important than chairs.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if we need more time to eat because the catering team is late, the DJ will talk to us and be like, hey, we're going to push this back a few minutes. Don't rush through your meal. Everything's still fine. And when we're all communicating, the wedding day is very smooth.
Rob, this was supposed to be about timelines, not what a great person you are.
or
But
when you
also-
get to eat your
Or when you get to eat.
But also, they are great. So let's just say that out there.
It's
too.
just a PSA for all photographers. If you are doing nothing, somebody needs help. Don't waste your time.
I love it. I love it. Well, perfect. Well, tell everyone who's listening how they can find you guys, your website and your Instagram. Besides Bustld, we want to let them know how to find you.
Yeah, sure. So our website is Rob plus spelled out Plus Kristen with an I and an N or an EN. You know there's an N at the end, obviously. .com. So rob+Kristen.com. We're also on Instagram at Rob_plus_Kristen. Again, all spelled out because apparently you can't use a plus sign in your Instagram handle, which is a real bummer.
Yeah, that is a bummer.
Or in your URL. It's
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got yelled at by the developers when you guys came on.
I'm so sorry about that. If I had known when I filled out our business paperwork that was going to be such an issue, I might have considered an ampersand.
So far, it hasn't caused any tax fraud problems. So, the IRS has still figured out how to locate us.
Imagine that. Well,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you guys so much for coming in today. We
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.